Pathways to Diversity. As a Biodiversity Convention key member, India's pandemic recovery must be greened. India is a main member or the key member of the Biodiversity Convention. And to keep its name up, the recovery from the coronavirus pandemic should be done in a green way. Means it should not affect the environment in a bad way. The UN Summit on Biodiversity convened on September 13 in the midst of a global crisis caused by the novel coronavirus that is thought to have spilled over to humans from an animal reservoir. So, an UN summit took place on September 30 in the middle of this pandemic. In New York, member nations of the Convention Biological Diversity took note of the link between biodiversity loss and the spread of animal pathogens, calling for an end to destructive industrial and commercial practices. So in the UN summit, they have discussed various things, the various reasons why we have got this coronavirus pandemic and so on, and they also discuss the ways to stop it and how to implement it. There is consensus that conservation targets set a decade ago in Aichi, Japan, to be achieved by 2020 have spectacularly failed. Evidence is presented by the latest UN government biodiversity outlook for fifth report. None of the 20 years targets has been fully met. So actually, before 10 years ago, in Aichi, Japan, they have set a target to do a certain thing. It's about the welfare of the environment, and the deadline for that is 10 years, a decade, 10 years. So they were not able to achieve it. Obviously, as we are present now, we know that they have not been able to do it. And not only that, the targets which have kept the targets which have lasted until now with a deadline of 20 years, even those targets have not been fully met. They're just partially completed. So basically, many targets which people aim to be completed by 2020 have not been completed. Many countries have chosen to ignore the connection between biodiversity and well-being and depleted ecological capital in the pursuit of financial prosperity. So the one of the main reason is that many countries who have participated or who have agreed to take up these challenges and to set a deadline and do something before it. One of the main reason why these countries have not achieved their targets is that they are giving 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 preference to financial growth than ecological growth. So they are not spending much money on the ecological category. They are just spending money for themselves. Among the Aichi targets that fell by the wayside are those on reform or phasing out of subsidies that erode biodiversity, steps for resource use within safe ecological limits, preventing industrial fisheries from destroying threatened species and vulnerable ecosystems, and an end to pollution, including growing plastic waste. So, as we just read in the UN summit, different countries have come together and have discussed the ways to stop it. And these are some ways to stop it. They have given they have given various steps to stop the ecological balance here. A bright spot is the partial progress made on protecting surface and subsurface water, inland, coastal, and marine areas. Though many countries have actually failed in meeting their targets, we actually have one advantage. It is that we have maintained proper marine areas, proper coastline areas, and etc. But the losses appear even more stark from WWF's Living Planet Index, which points to precipitous declines in vertebrate populations, a key indicator by 68% over 1970 levels. So even though we have that advantage of maintaining some areas, the disadvantages are way more effective and also more in number than the advantages. Uh, for, um, for example, the WWF's Living Planet Index, it shows that the population of vertebrates or the animals which have vertebral columns have decreased by 68%. Faced with fast eroding ecosystem health, the 196 CBD member countries must chart a greener course, aligning it with the Paris Agreement, which has a significant impact on the health of the flora and fauna. So, especially during this pandemic, we should make sure that the health of the health of the animals, um, fauna and flora both, means flowers, trees, animals, birds, etc. We should make sure that um, all of these have proper health, and also at last even we should have proper health. So in order to achieve that, every country has to follow the Paris Agreement, um, which has become very successful in saving the lives of many people. At Wednesday's summit, India's message was one of the pride in an ancient conservation tradition, as one of the few mega diverse countries, and one of that recognizes the value of nature as much as the destructive impact of unregulated resource exploitation. So on Wednesday in the UN summit, when in India actually had a proud moment, because it shared all its traditional metals. It shared all its traditional methods to control pollution and ecological imbalance. And at the same time, India is actually very famous over the world as a mega diverse country. It is all e- even it's not only famous for that one reason. It's also famous for its unregulated exploitation of resources. Means in India, we don't exploit the resources in a proper way. We have exhausted many resources. Nation laws of the 1970s and 1980s have indeed shielded islands of biodiversity, particularly in about 5% of the country's land designated as protected areas, but they are today seen as irritants to speedy extraction of natural resources. So actually, because of some national laws which were provided to India in 1970s or in 1980s, because of that we actually have protected so much land. We actually said 5% of the land, but by saying that it is by labeling the land as a protected area. And nowadays these lands are becoming, because of these lands, it is becoming very difficult or hard for the people to extract any unnecessary resources. In this unseemly hurried due process is sought to be dispensed with as envisaged by the new EIA norms proposed by the NDA government. So the NDA government has proposed some new forms. It has envisaged the details in those forms. Means it has kind of it has predicted those it has predicted what would happen in those forms. There is little concern for indigenous communities that have fostered biodiversity and no effort to make them strong partners in improving the health of the forests and buffer zones. So the India government is actually trying to improve the current situation of the biodiversity. Well, if it really wants to do it, it should take up the it should join the local communities which are doing a very good job in saving the biodiversity. Now the CBD members are set to drop fresh conservation targets to be finalized next year. India too has the opportunity to plan a trajectory of green growth after COVID-19 around clean energy, ecological agriculture, a freeze and expansion of mining and dam building, resource recovery from waste, and regeneration of arid lands. So, at this now, many countries are actually trying to improve or reform their present biodiversity situations. So, even this is the best chance for India to plan what it is going to do after the COVID-19 pandemic. There are several things it can do. It should join the coalition of the enlightened. Yes, so even India should join. So first of all, coalition is a group which is formed by two different things. In here, it means that a coalition is a group formed by two different countries. So even India should go and should be a part of that coalition, and should improve its biodiversity. Thank you.